Okay, we'll see how this goes. So we're looking at the focus area. As I said, this should be mostly some summary stuff for you. We've done a lot of this last year in the preliminary course. So let's just make sure we know what we're talking about. There is some new stuff, and at the end of the presentation there is one slide that I'll leave on for you, which is important for you to know about and to get some notes for yourself. So we're looking at fonts, file formats and properties. There's also a quick summary of yesterday's effort with calculations just to show you. So let's get going. Starting with fonts, yay. We all know what fonts are, the styles of letters that we use in our presentations, in our portfolios, in our projects. They have a purpose and they have a language of their own. Now we know fonts come in three main styles. First one is serif fonts like Times Roman. Second one is sans serif fonts like Arial. And the third one is decorative fonts. Now this font that I've got here is called Lobster. It belongs in Google Drive, or Google Docs, sorry. Technically Comic Sans is a decorative font. If you're wondering why, another reason why I hate it so much. They all have a purpose and they all have their job to be done. And if they're done and used appropriately, great. When they're used inappropriately, it sort of sticks out like a sore thumb. Hey, doesn't it, Moses? Sticking out like a sore thumb, thank you for listening. Thumbs up, buddy. So serif fonts for starters. They've got little strokes at the bottom. Here's one that I prepared earlier. Hello, Tamison. The serifs are the little things at the bottom of the font, and what they do, they actually have a specific purpose. And if you read newspapers, newspapers are always set in Times Roman font because it's a newspaper on print. The serifs, little strokes at the bottom of the letter, will guide your eyes across the page. That is why they are there. That is why we use serif fonts for body text. Compare that, friends and neighbours, with sans serif fonts, such as... Oh, sorry. Before we do that. Sans serif fonts are used for headers, mostly, and bylines and headlines. And they're used also as on-screen fonts. And this, by the way, is why Calibri is the default font in Microsoft Word, because most of what you do in Microsoft Word is on screen. And sans serif fonts read more easily on screen. I don't have the research that proves that, but it is out there. So here we have Arial, capital letter A. Look, no serif. Yay. All right, decorative fonts. Decorative fonts are very beautiful. That is the point. They are beautiful, but they are hard to read. They are used for impact, not for body text, if you want to read. And the point I'm making here is decorative fonts are too hard to read to be used extensively as a body text. And even though I know what I've typed there, I find that really hard to read. I'm getting some smirks, which is good. If you can read the rest of it, I'll put it in there just to see how annoyed I could make you. So have a read when you're own time. So why do we format text? Actually, the answer for all of these is the same. And the different formatting we can do, we can bold, we can italicize, we can underline. Yes, by the way, I am reading off the slide, don't throw stuff. You can change your alignment from left to center to right to justified. You can use indents, you can use bullets, you can use numbers as in a numbered list. You can change the size, you can change the color. These are all done for a purpose. They are all done to highlight or to impose greater meaning on something. So if I wanted to emphasize in font, what I'd do is I'd bold or italicize. As a personal thing, I never underline. And there's two reasons for it. Number one, underlines make the font look ugly. Number two, underlines denote hyperlinks in this day and age. So if you ever wonder why I never underline anything, that's why. It's a hyperlink and I expect to be able to click on it. But also I think underlines are ugly. That's just me. Other things we can do with our fonts, stroke and fill. Now to increase the stroke is basically a way of bolding a font, and I tried to show that by bolding the word stroke here. It didn't particularly work. Fill means you can give yourself an outline colour, and a fill colour is different. Again, that will be done for decoration rather than, and for impact. You use these very sparingly. We use headings and subheadings, once again, to identify what we're talking about, impact. Now, here's the word. What's the word, Melinda? Oh, that's right, pagination. like Page and Imagination. I don't need Josh to make the joke for me. Thank you, Josh, well played. All right, now, this was actually a question a couple of years ago in the HSC, and it stumped everybody. What is pagination? It's really simple. It's page formatting and layout. And when you use or implement pagination, what happens is your pages come up formatted as you would see using what's known as a WYSIWYG editor. WYSIWYG, W-Y-S-I-W-Y-G. What you see is what you get, which is what we use in Microsoft Word, which is how Google Docs appears. It's how every word processor appears. What you see on a page is what you get out of a screen. What you see on the screen is what you get out of a page, sorry. And that's using formatting and pagination. It's so innately in-tuned and embedded with us that we don't even think about it. It just turns up. The one thing that doesn't use a WYSIWYG editor is an HTML editor, because pages can extend technically infinitely. Oh look, page layout and numbering. And here we have the font and page and whatever else options from Microsoft Word. So we can change the style and layout and colour and stroke and goodness knows what all else for our fonts. And we do that for impact. And we use it sparingly, but you already all know this. Move on. Now for the fun stuff. And not this slide, but the next one will have deliberately a lot of stuff on it to drive you nuts to give you a point. So graphics we know are images, pictures and animations designed to provide more than just words. But we knew that. Now for the fun stuff. Different file formats serve different purposes and have different properties. So here we go. Yay, JPEG. Screw that, let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to read that because you can read it for yourself, but the point I'm making here, and please don't type this, the point I'm making here is that there is a seriously large amount of jargon built into this course, built into all computing actually, that will drive you mental. And the key takeout, and this is actually what I've got in the second to last slide, the key takeout of this presentation is to get your head around the jargon. All these words in yellow are jargonistic key terms that you need to know. So JPEG, raster, lossy, 24-bit color, transparency, animation, GIF, codec, alpha channel, lossless, lossy, algorithm. All these words are key terms and you need to know what they all mean. Now, if you want to type this out, knock yourself out, you've got the presentation already in the classroom, so don't do it. Let's go through and make sense of it all. The previous slide showed that there is a huge amount of jargon and we have to make sense of it. So what I'm going to do for the next dozen slides or so is make sense of it. Start by defining some terms. We already know this from yesterday. 8-bit color, the number of data bits allowed to assign color. Higher number of bits, 16, 24, 32 or 48, more colors. Bigger image, higher quality. The formula is 2 to the power of x. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, whatever, equals 256, 2 to the 8th power. 2 times 2 times 2, 24 times, gets you to 16 million. 2 times 2 times 2, 32 times, gets you to 4.2 billion. See? It says so in the presentation. 48-bit is a seriously large number. I don't know what it is. It's about 10 to the 300. It's a stupidly big number. And there is actually a point of this. A human with good eyesight, so not me, can clearly distinguish 10 million different colours and shades. 10 million only. Look at 24-bit, and we don't use 24-bit anymore, we use 32. A computer can distinguish in 24-bit colour 16 million different colours and shades, more than we can. We use 32-bit. A computer basically has the eyesight of a Terminator. It can distinguish 4 billion different colours and shades. We can distinguish 10 million. It can do 400 times more. Pretty impressive. And so therefore, when you go to 48-bit, it's getting ridiculous, really. So this is colour, and this is how you calculate it. We did that yesterday. Transparency. again, you should probably know what this already is. It's the ability to strip out a colour from an image. So here we have everyone's favourite Pokemon, Detective Pikachu. The checkerboard background means it's transparent, so we don't see it. That colour has been stripped out of the image. And that is also useful for animation. Now, this is the definition here, a series of frames to produce the illusion of motion. Some stats here for you. 8 frames per second is the minimum to trick your eyes into thinking something is moving. 8 frames per second. 10 to 12 frames per second is our old Bugs Bunny cartoons. 24 frames per second is film standard. Don't quite know why, but 29.97. I don't know why it's not 30. I don't know. Thank you for asking. I don't know. Is the television standard. 60 to 120 frames per second is our console standard. And here we have Pikachu going at about 8 frames per second. Again, showing that you get your eyes get the opinion that this thing is actually running. It's also showing that we've got a transparent background as well. Thank you, Pikachu. Okay. Here we have 2 more terms that you guys may not know, but certainly should be able to use. Vector and raster. These are image file types. So vector graphics, if we look down the left-hand table, they're drawn with shapes. You draw a circle, or a semicircle, or a triangle. It's geometric, it's mathematical. If I was to ask you all to draw a 10 by 10 grid on your page for me, find point 55 on that grid, the center point, and draw a square with the top left-hand corner at 5, 2 units around, you'd all draw the same thing for me. You're drawing basically geometrically. This is how vector graphics work. And because they are drawn with shapes, they are scalable. They can be made bigger or smaller with no loss in quality. Relatively smaller file sizes. Programs that use vector graphics include things like InDesign, Illustrator, Paint Tool Sci, WordArt, ClipArt, Adobe Animate, good one, Josh. And one thing that doesn't use vectors is a digital camera or a video camera. Compare that with the raster. Raster graphics are painted by pixels, dot by dot. For those of you who are artistically inclined, the original raster animator, or raster painter was Georges Seurat. And if you don't know who Georges Seurat is, go find out. He is amazing. But he painted with dots. It was called a style called pointillism. They're non-scalable. As you increase the size of the image, it gets blocky, and you can start to see the pixels rather than the image. Just quickly run back a little bit. See how, do it on the previous slide. See how Pikachu here looks quite blocky? That's because that image has been scaled up. And you can, instead of seeing Pikachu, you're seeing the pixels that make him. Is that a he or a she, by the way? How can you tell the difference?
Females have a heart at the end of the tail.
There you go. Females have a heart. Wow. Oh, sorry, female Pikachus. All right. So let's go back here now. So raster graphics are non-scalable. Means they get blocky when you get bigger. Much bigger file size compared to vector. Digital cameras use them. Video cameras use them. Every camera uses them. Photoshop, Microsoft Paint, etc. use raster graphics. And the important take out of that one, by the way, is twofold. 1, non-scalable, and 2, relatively much bigger file sizes. Pardon me. Syllabus we need to know about where we get our images from. So when you import an image, where can we get them from? ClipArt, screenshots, scanners, drawing tablets, still video cameras, image libraries, stock photos. Yay! We can get our images from anywhere. We can make our own. We can pay for them. We can pinch them. We shouldn't. We need to consider the licensing options. We need to consider paying royalties. This is why if you're doing this work as a commercial venture, you will need to pay royalties. That's fun. Fair use. If you're trying to, for example, if a teacher was trying to explain the importance of La Gioconda, most commonly known as Mona Lisa, to an art class, it would be fair use to reproduce that image, at least a version of that image. If you were to do a pixel by pixel perfect rendition, that might not be fair use anymore. Okay, another word that gets used, a codec. Sounds impressive. This is an algorithm to decrease file size. Simple as that. That's what a codec does. It decreases file size. There are two types of codecs. Oh, more fun with jargon, lossy and lossless. Lossy, let's start with lossless. A lossless compressor means that the original PNG uses lossless, JPEG uses lossy. This is badly worded, I apologise. JPEG uses a lossy compression, which means the original image is changed and cannot be reproduced exactly using lossy compression. If I use PNG, the compressor can decompress and reproduce exactly, pixel perfect, the original file, or dot perfect, the original file. So, two important things here. PNG uses a lossless compression, and this is why, by the way, PNG files are slightly bigger on average than their JPEG compatriots, because PNG uses a lossless compression that cannot make the file size as small as JPEG, but on the upside, you can reproduce exactly the original file. JPEG uses lossy, you cannot reproduce the original file. So MP3 and M4A are lossy compressors. You cannot reproduce the original WAV file perfectly. So there we go. Lossless compressors don't squash the file as much. Lossy compressors can reduce by more than 90% with no significant loss in quality. This is why we use JPEG a lot, because we can squash a file hugely without actually breaking the quality that much. Now, where does the word codec come from? Code and decode. So the red there, codec. And that's actually where it comes from. It's like modem, modulator and demodulator. Not that we use modems anymore. Sorry?
Sorry, no.
Moving on. Choice of lossy or lossless. Here's our comparison table. Lossy compression on the left can reduce file size by up to 90% with no significant loss of quality. Remembering that the lossy compressor takes what we can't see and strips it out, so it's using limitations of human vision. And that's a really important point. Same with the compressors for audio. Takes the stuff that we can't hear and strips it out, which reduces the file size without reducing quality. It does remove information, so the original file cannot be remade. A lossy image compressor is JPEG, a lossy audio compressor is MP3 or M4A. All video codecs use lossy compression. I'll prove that at the end of this presentation. A lossless compressor can reduce file size by 50%, which is still pretty good. Doesn't remove information so you can reproduce. A lossless image compressor is PNG. Now I've got a clause here on GIF. And this is a fight that I have every year with some examiner somewhere, because GIF does use a lossless compressor if the original image has less than 256 colours, and less than 255. If the image has more than 255 colours, so I take a happy snap on my phone, comes to me as a JPEG or an HEIC, I then go and save that down as a GIF. I am stripping out 99.5% of the information. I go from millions of colours, actually 99.9% of the information, millions of colours down to 255. I am compressing the image. Now this is my personal bugbear, by the way. Technically, yes, GIF is a lossless compression. It uses a dictionary compression algorithm, but you've got to start with less than 255 colours. A lossless audio compressor that nobody ever uses is FLAC. Free lossless audio compressor. It's open source. No one uses it, but it's there. And there is no video that uses a lossless compressor. I will prove it soon. Let's think about audio for a second. And hey, we get a picture in here as well. We need to understand some properties of audio before we can go any further. Now, once again, we go back to bits and bytes and all that other nonsense. We've already had that discussion. We need to know three key properties of audio. But audio encoding has two main bits, actually three. The first one is the sample rate, the number of samples per second. So in this example, we see the blue dots are the sample points. Number of times that gets sampled per second. Now we always measure in kilohertz, which is thousands of samples per second, because if you take less than that, you won't get it. You'll get nothing out of it. You won't be able to have anything intelligible. And we normally sample in 44.1 kilohertz, 44,100 hertz. There is a reason for the number. It's a limitation of human hearing plus 10%. Doubled for stereo. So human beings can hear, if you've got really good hearing, 20 kilohertz. And I will actually ask if anyone can hear this. Where is my sound gen? Tone gen. And I apologise if this is going to annoy you. Actually, no, I don't apologise. All right, this is 20 kilohertz, okay? Let's turn the volume up and drive you all insane. Can anybody hear this? All right, this is playing 20 kilocycle tone. Can anyone hear it? Nobody? All right, I'll drag it down. It should be really, really high pitched. And when you can hear it, you will know. Let's drag it down. Take it down to 15,000. Right, I got some reactions there. That's 17 kilocycle. That's 17,000 hertz. Who can hear it? Just show of hands. Is it driving you all mental?
Yes.
Right, that's where I'm at. I'm at 13 kilocycle. All right, we'll stop there. Okay. So, the best of you are at around about 17 kilocycle tone. Theoretically, you should be able to hear 20, which is the very highest registers of human hearing. Now, I'm old and going deaf. Sorry. And I've lost those upper registers. I can hear 13 kilocycle only now. Jodie, where did you get to?
Where you were.
Are you deaf? You poor thing.
So. I've actually had a hearing test before.
That's entertainment for you.
Yeah, well,
And this is actually the thing. I think I've lost my upper registers from playing very loud music too much. And the reason why I was asking you specifically is because I know you do the entertainment. All right, so there's two things to look at there. What we're talking about is the number of samples per second. Now, I was playing 20 kilocycle tone, 20,000 hertz plus 10% is 22,000, double it for 44 is stereo human hearing. That's where the number comes from. The sample quality. I'm not going to say it, don't worry. The sample quality is how many data bits you assign to each sample. If you have 8 data bits per sample, then you can assign between 0 and 255 on your scale, which means it's not a particularly high quality sample. If you have 16 data bits per sample, your separations, instead of going from 0 to 255, go from 0 to 65,000. If you use 24-bit, 0 to 16 million. Obviously, higher quality, higher sample rate, bigger file size, etc. I'm not restarting my computer now. Here's an example, by the way, of why analog audio is always going to sound better than digital audio. Fight me if you like. What we have as a red line is an audio sample, an audio wave. What we have in the grey is the digital samples trying to capture that. And you'll see the digital samples are stepped because they have to be, and they can't perfectly capture that analog sound. Can go very, very close. That's why our bit rate, our sample rate goes up to try and get closer and closer and closer to that perfect curve. But we have basically rectangles trying to draw curves, and it doesn't work. So if ever you hear someone say, oh no, the record sounds better, well, yeah, it does, because it's a pure analog sound, whereas a CD is a digitized version of that pure analog sound. There's a whole lot more to that records versus CDs discussion, which we won't get into here because that's a degree course in audio phonics. But that's a brief explanation of why analog sounds better than digital. There's always something missing. It's kind of cool. All right, we did this yesterday, so therefore we're not going to spend too much time today, but here's a nice little summary for you. Calculating file sizes is relatively easy, and there's one slide on here that you all want to reproduce because it's got 3 of the calculations you need on the one slide. It's a simple, right? Yeah, simple. 4-step process, and you need to be given all the information first. You can't do this by dead reckoning. You've got to be given everything. Step 1, get the dimensions and properties, that's the hard step. 2, get units for your final calculation. Because we measure colour as bit depth, not byte depth, because we measure audio quality, sample quality in bit rate, not byte rate, we are always working in bits. We therefore want to get out megabytes or terabytes or whatever, depending on the calculation. So that's why yesterday I showed you that denominator 8 times 1024 times whatever. Pick one of our standard formulas and plug in some numbers and see how we go. Here are, no, not easy. If it was easy, we wouldn't be worrying about it so much. Step 1, the hardest part, get your properties or dimensions. Uncompressed image, properties and dimensions. Uncompressed, please note, you can't do compressed images. It's not possible. It's impossible to figure out. The image length and breadth, or another way, the ratio, the pixels across by down, the image size. Number of data bits to prepare colour, 2 to the nth power, etc., etc., etc. For uncompressed audio, once again, the length of audio in seconds, the number of discrete channels of audio, for example, mono, stereo, DTS, or DTS again. Quality of the sample, low, medium, high, or studio. 24-bit for studio. If you're going to go and make lots of money making music, awesome, congratulations. You'll record in 24-bit because you can, and then you'll mix down to 16-bit. And the rate of audio sample, 44 kilohertz, 96 kilohertz. We've already discussed that function of human hearing loss or human hearing. Compressed audio properties, for example, the encoding rate, the length of audio, actually pretty easy. And here I think, nope. Oh, uncompressed video. Once again, you're never going to get asked to do video. It's a bit of fun. Screen resolution, colour depth, length of video, frame rate, for example, 24 for film, TV, games, whatever, plus the audio calculations above. Pick up your units. I've already said, we always start in bits. You always start in bits. You've got to get to bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, and whatever on from there. So how do we convert bits to megabytes? We've already done this. 1 byte equals 8 bits. 1024 bytes is a kilobyte. 1024 kilobytes is a megabyte. 1024 megabytes is a gigabyte. Blah, blah, blah. 1024 terabytes is an exabyte. Does anybody work in exabytes? There are companies that work in more than exabytes. Amazon is a huge business. Their database would be probably measured in petabytes, which is the next step up from exabytes. So yeah, it goes on. Come on, next. So, numerator, and there's your denominator. You already know this. Move on. The standard formula, uncompressed images, uncompressed audio, compressed audio. That is probably going to be a useful slide for you. So don't worry about writing it down now necessarily. I will come back to you, and this is already up in the classroom for you. But a useful slide, because if you need to know what the standard formulas are, bingo. This won't happen in an exam. There's your audio. Video, sorry. And I actually have a Google spreadsheet to go through some of these to show you how this all works. Right, next thing, got to talk about image enhancements. So there's my original image, my little minion. And I can stretch and I can skew, terms you need to understand. So stretching, I'm making one dimension, whether it be the horizontal or vertical, bigger than the other side. Skew means to bend. Rotating, so I've turned them upside down. Adjusting colour. You need to be able to use these terms appropriately when you need to in an exam. Audio and video terms, yay! I already discussed this. Now, I'm saying it here, so I may as well make the point. Sample size is a term used in the syllabus. It's probably a bad term. Sample quality would be better. Whatever, it's the number of bits to assign to each sample when digitising audio, etc., etc., etc. You see I'm repeating myself a lot. We've already talked about lossy. And remember, lossy, you cannot recreate the original file. lossless. You can recreate the original file, but doesn't squash as much. Video compression is amazing. Using things like keyframes and delta changes, it can reduce a file size by 96%, and we still call it high quality. Let's prove it. This is the Lord of the Rings calculation that we discussed the other day. So it's 1920 by 1080, 32-bit color, 24 frames per second. The length in seconds, 11.5 hours is 41,400 seconds. Sample rate for the audio is 48 kilohertz. Sample quality is 16-bit, 9 channels, because I'm talking about the Blu-ray, which is 7.2. Once again, 41,400. Size is 7,000 gigabytes, so 7.7 terabytes. Now, when we think about this, it sits on 6 Blu-ray discs. And it actually doesn't use all 50 gigabytes of each Blu-ray, but let's just go with the calculation, because this makes the calculation even more awesome. 6 Blu-rays at 50 gigabytes each is 300 gigabytes of Blu-ray, total storage of 300 gigabytes. Which means our 7,700 gigabytes needs to squash down to 300 gigabytes. It squashes it down to 3.9% its original size, and we call it high quality. That's the point I'm trying to make about video compression. It is amazing. Because we say our Blu-rays are high quality. They are. But we've still only got 4% of the original file if we take out all the compression. That is incredible. Nice. Okay, last topic to consider. World Wide Web. A large part of our industry is based around the interwebs. So, its history. Where did the interweb come from? Well, actually it came from the American military. The American military was trying really hard to figure out what to do in the case of Armageddon, because they wanted to have the intelligence community being able to communicate if one part of the country was destroyed by Russian bombs. Happy start to the internet, congratulations. Then Tim Berners-Lee came along and invented the World Wide Web at CERN. His desire was to take different networks in CERN, the European Centre for Nuclear Research, that didn't talk to each other and have them talk to each other. And he came up with this HTTP protocol. And from there, it went kind of nuts. Now, what has driven in the last 20 years, some thoughts from you guys, please. What has driven the development of the internet? One of them is screamingly obvious, and say it. Seriously. Sorry?
Changing consumer needs.
Okay, so shopping, definitely. There's another one. Sorry?
Google.
Not Google. Google has certainly helped. Gaming. We game online. And none of you is going to say it, although you're all thinking of it. Porn. Seriously. Now, I wouldn't necessarily write this in the exam, but the adult industry has driven the way the internet works. You can apparently, allegedly, download content from the internet. That was something very new that wasn't done before the adult industry came along and did it. Shopping online. You can subscribe, I believe, to these channels if you so choose. That was relatively new 20 years ago. But when the adult industry proved that it could be done and make billions of dollars profit out of it, all of a sudden retailers said, hey, hang on a second, this works, we can jump on board after all. And then we get companies like Amazon and Google who legitimise that online shopping experience. And then they jump on board and say, shop online, and they give this, and particularly Amazon, I think, was probably and eBay were the first two really big companies to say, hey, you can shop online safely. No one's going to steal your stuff because we can encrypt your data so it won't get pinched. To the point where Amazon has not had a catastrophic loss of data yet, and they work really hard to maintain that security. eBay rarely suffers data breaches nowadays. So all of a sudden you can shop safely online. Elon Musk's first big company, do you know what it was? And it wasn't Tesla. PayPal. Thank you, Elon Musk. He gave us PayPal. He sold it for $300 million and probably got ripped off. But he sold it for $300 million in 1999, which was worth a lot of money then. And then came up with Tesla and SpaceX and whatever else. And so all of a sudden from inappropriate starts, online shopping has become mainstream, and I'm sure every one of us in this room has bought something online before, probably from a legitimate reseller. Amazon, eBay, Facebook Marketplace now, Gumtree if you go there. You also might shop online via JB Hi-Fi or Myer or whoever else. And it's all perfectly legitimate. And that has been, in the last 20 years, developed out of the fact that the world saw the adult film industry saying, we can make money out of this internet thing, and they made money out of that internet thing. Move on. Someone's broken my presentation. Now, speaking of the adult industry, part of the fun of the internet is having it age appropriate. So how many of you at home have a restricted access to the internet? You can't get everywhere you want to go, like we have here inside the Department of Education. There are sites you can't go to. Restricted access, yes. Some of us do, some don't. Have you been in the past had restricted access? Using things like NetNanny or whatever? How do you stop young people from getting access to online sex, online violence, bad language, trolling? Well, trolling's easy, get rid of Discord. Social media. Remember, social media all has a 13 plus banner on it. So how do you stop young people from getting access to all this stuff? And by the way, I'm a parent to young people and I don't know this either. We've already discussed factors that have led to the growth of the World Wide Web. Now, as developers, we need to think about appropriate development of content. So let's develop appropriate content. And we need to consider our audience. Who is your target audience? Your projects all have a target audience. Consider, and this is from the syllabus by the way, not me, fonts and font compatibility. As an example, this presentation is set in Roboto font. That belongs to Google Docs. If I download this presentation to a PowerPoint, it won't display properly because there's no Roboto font on the computers. So I've got to have an appropriate substitute font, which I will say will be Arial. There you go. A new term for you, cascading style sheets. A CSS, a style sheet, provides a universal and uniform look to a series of web pages. You apply the style sheet and it gives you your headers, your body text, your indents, your font styles, layouts, sizes, everything. Define it once, apply it throughout. That way you get consistency. And just about every website will use a style sheet of some sort to ensure consistency of layout. Oh, let's talk about page layout and object positioning. When you're making web pages, when you're making anything really, this is about design. Buttons, scroll bars, drop-down lists, whatever else need to be placed appropriately. Think of your workflow. Our use of hyperlinks. We've already discussed the idea that hyperlinks are underlined and possibly blue. That's just a standard expectation. Our use of images, including size, both on screen and file size. If you're waiting for a huge image to download, are you going to sit there and wait for it to download? Are you going to say, I'm done and move on? That's in talking about both file size and screen size, and appropriate use of formats as well. Two more terms you need to understand, HTTP and RTSP. HTTP, you know, the Hypertext Transport Protocol. That's just web pages loading. RTSP, you know it and you use it all the time. Places like YouTube, real-time streaming protocol. Where is best place to use RTSP? Yes, YouTube of course, but also you might be a big fan of podcasts. That will use an RTSP as well, real-time streaming protocol. Allows you to suck down media and play it back instantaneously rather than downloads. Don't worry if you didn't catch that, there's coming up at the end. Let's also consider authoring. Who is the author of the work? Have they been acknowledged as the author of said work? Publishing. Who's published the work? Who is responsible for that work being published? And if you are the publisher and you accept something being published that you didn't author and it's wrong or defamatory, who's in trouble there? You, the publisher. Consider copyright. It's easy to pull stuff off the internet. Dead easy. It's also illegal, depending on the nature of the content you're sucking down. And so therefore you do need to think about copyright and royalties and blah, blah, blah. All right, so here's the end of the presentation. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Know your jargon and know it well. And know your file formats and properties. They will come up in exams. Use it well, especially in the exam. The industry-specific terminology, that is to say the meta-language of this course, is detailed. And if you can use it well during an exam, use the right terms at the right time during an exam, markers will look at that and say, yay, you know what you're talking about. Right, so, number one. Take out number one. Get a good working list of all the meta-language, that is to say jargon terms used in this course. Go through this presentation. There was a couple of slides where I highlighted in yellow, but anything that you're thinking, that's a weird, nerdy term, that's part of your meta-language. Number two, the next slide, which I'm going to stop on, has a list of file formats that you do need to know about and their key properties. Here it is. So we have text file formats that you need to know. Key properties of text, PDF, rich text, doc, and CSV. Image file formats that you need to know. Audio file formats that you need to know. Video file formats that you need to know. MOV/QT, movie, and QuickTime. They're both QuickTime formats. Depends on how they turn up. And the last two, HTML and CSS as your file formats, but also, I'll change that. That HTML down the bottom should be HTTP, and RTSP you need to know as streaming and data transfer protocols. Now I'm going to leave this slide up. I'm going to end the presentation now. Thank you for listening.